labels storage bins, and keeps extra dry erase markers in my trunk. So when I bought my first house at 29, I didn't want character. I wanted predictable. It was a small place on the edge of Tulsa. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a tidy yard, with a tree that leaned slightly like it had survived a few storms. The street was quiet. Neighbors had wind chimes and porch lights that came on at dusk. The first night I slept there, I remember thinking, this is what safety feels like. I measured everything the first weekend, mapped out furniture placement, planned upgrades, paint, new fixtures, better insulation before winter. Then I noticed the closet in the main bedroom. It was deeper than it should have been. It wasn't impressively spacious, but it was oddly deep. The back of it disappeared into darkness even in daylight. The closet swallowed light. I hung my clothes, lined up my shoes, put cedar blocks on the shelf. For a few weeks, everything felt normal. Then one night, I smelled cigarette smoke. It was faint, more like the memory of smoke. It brushed past me while I was already in bed and disappeared almost as quickly. I don't smoke. None of my close friends smoke. I told myself the previous owner probably had. Houses hold smells. That's what people say. It didn't happen again for several nights. I forgot about it. Fall teaching is exhausting. By the time I got home, all I wanted was quiet. Shower, leftovers, a show playing softly while I graded papers. The smoke came back about a week later, closer to midnight. This time it felt closer to the closet. I got up, slid the door open, leaned in and sniffed like an idiot. Nothing but stale air. I bought charcoal odor absorbers the next day, plug-in fresheners. I vacuumed and wiped the baseboards. For a while I thought I'd fixed it, but over the next couple months, the smell returned on certain nights. Not every night, but always late. Always after I was already in bed. The closet itself started feeling wrong. Warmer than the rest of the room sometimes, stale even after cleaning. And the sliding door didn't close flush unless I pushed it harder than it should need. I blamed the track. Houses settle. Still, I began double-checking it before bed. I'd slide it shut, press until I felt resistance, then stand there listening to the house breathe. Ducts ticking, refrigerator humming, distant traffic. I wasn't terrified, but I was always alert, and that's exhausting. One night around 2 a.m, I got up to use the bathroom. On my way back, the smell was so clear it made my eyes sting, like someone had just put out a cigarette nearby. I stood in the doorway, hand on the light switch, and listened. Nothing. I didn't turn the light on. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to confirm anything. I went back to bed and pulled the comforter up higher than usual. In January, my energy bill jumped. It could have been normal winter usage, but I'm not great at ignoring inconsistencies. So I called a contractor to check insulation in the bedroom. He was polite, practical. He stepped into the closet and knocked on the back wall. The first tap sounded solid. Then he moved his hand slightly and the sound changed. Hollow in a way that didn't match the rest of the wall. He tapped again. "This sounds hollow in the wrong way," he said. I felt that twist in my stomach. He ran his fingers along the drywall and found the edge of a panel I had never noticed. It wasn't a typical access hatch. The edges were too clean, like it had been designed to disappear unless you knew where to look. He popped it open. The air that came out was stale and heavy. Behind the closet wall was a narrow void between studs, deeper than the space should have allowed. It was big enough for someone to crouch. At first, I didn't see much. Then my eyes adjusted. Crushed water bottles, a dusty blanket pushed toward the back, and a white slip of paper that caught the light. The contractor reached in and pulled it out. Fast food receipt, 2 weeks old. The date was bold at the top. 2 weeks meant while I had been living there, while I was sleeping in that room. There were no broken windows, no damaged locks. Everything looked normal, which made it even worse. I called the police. Saying the words out loud felt surreal. There's a hidden space in my wall. 2 officers came. They were polite, but the questions felt misplaced. Any exes? Any issues at work? Are you sure that receipt isn't yours? I stood in my own bedroom explaining that I don't eat fast food in my closet. They took photos, bagged the receipt and 1 bottle, suggested changing the locks. They couldn't find obvious forced entry, so there wasn't much they could promise. After they left, I sat on my bed and stared at the open panel. The space was positioned so that someone crouching inside would be just a few feet from where I slept. Close enough to hear my breathing, close enough to know when my alarm went off. I moved to the living room that night, dragged my pillows and blanket out like I was camping, left the lights on, locked and relocked the front door. For weeks, I didn't sleep in that bedroom. The panel was sealed, the locks changed, but something had changed. I started noticing every gap in the house. The attic access, the crawlspace vent, the small spaces I'd never considered before. The smoke never came back after the panel was discovered. In the spring, I put the house back on the market and told everyone it was for job reasons. I staged it carefully, let strangers walk through and comment on how cozy it felt. I nodded and smiled. On the day I handed over the keys, I didn't feel relieved. I felt tired. I didn't buy a haunted house. I bought a hiding place. I'm a paramedic in Aurora, and I bought the duplex for practical reasons. It made sense. Decent neighborhood, investment potential. It wasn't charming. It was functional. That was the appeal. When I moved in, I set everything up the way I like it. Boots by the door, gym bag on the hook, bed against the shared wall in the main bedroom because that's where it fit best. I didn't think twice about the wall I was sleeping against. The tapping started about 3 weeks later. It wasn't loud or violent. It was a light knock, always late, and always when the house had settled into that deep quiet where every small sound feels amplified. The first time I blamed pipes, old building noises. Temperature changes make drywall pop. I've lived in enough places to know houses make noise, but it kept happening, usually after midnight, sometimes closer to 2 or 3. A few taps, silence, then a few more like someone testing if there would be an answer. Sometimes I work nights, and my sleep schedule is unpredictable, so I assumed exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Then the whispering started. No conversation I could make out, just the sound of someone speaking softly right on the other side. You couldn't make anything out, but you could tell it was human because it had pauses where a reply should be. The first time I heard it, I sat upright in bed. It stopped immediately. I leaned my ear against the wall, which in hindsight feels stupid, but you do strange things when you're trying to convince yourself something is harmless. After that, every sound felt responsive. If I shifted in bed, the tapping stopped. If I stood up, the whispering cut off. I thought I was overtired. I've seen enough bad calls to know your brain can amplify things when you're running low on sleep. I bought a fan to drown it out. Then earplugs. Both helped, but sometimes I'd still wake up sensing movement through the wall, even if I couldn't hear it clearly. Eventually, I knocked on my neighbor's door. He looked normal, mid-30s, polite enough. I kept it casual. "Hey, I've been hearing tapping through the shared wall at night. Just wanted to check if something's going on." He blinked, then smiled like I'd told a harmless joke. "Nah," he said. "Probably the building." Completely dismissive. I let it go because what was I going to accuse him of? Talking near drywall? One night after a long shift, the tapping was louder. Then that whispering again. I called non-emergency. 2 officers came by, knocked next door, spoke to him, and he denied everything. The cops shrugged politely. No evidence, no crime. For a few days, it stopped. That's when I started noticing timing. The tapping happened after I'd been in bed for a while. The whispering stopped when I moved. It felt reactive. Spring came and I had a leak along the baseboard on the shared wall. Minor, but enough to require cutting into drywall. I hired a contractor because I didn't want to deal with it between shifts. When he opened the wall, he paused. "You got kids?" he asked. "No." He stepped aside so I could see. There was a small hole drilled clean through toward the other unit, about the size of a dime. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it. Wiring, old repair, pest inspection. But the placement didn't make sense for any of that. I crouched and looked through it. Dark on the other side. I stood up and traced the line of sight. The hole aligned perfectly with where my head rested on my pillow. My bed, my side, a direct line. I felt weird. I felt a kind of cold clarity. I called the police again, different officers this time. I showed them the hole, showed them the alignment.